My name is RC Williams, and this is my wife and business partner and everything else, Julianna Ormond. We are co-founders of Watchmen Action. We'll get to that in a second. It is great to see you all. And our goal here, you notice that we're sitting almost fireside chat style, is to do exactly that. So we have a couple of things we're going to cover, but what we really want to happen is for you guys to get engaged. There aren't any questions that are off limits, and we want you to leave with information that you need to take the next step in whatever goal that you want to accomplish in this fight, because we're all in it together. We actually, last night, we were on a call with Raj Doraisamy. He's the co-founder of Defend Florida. They've been doing a lot with election integrity.
Yep.
And they were actually trying to bring David Walsh in to speak in Lee County at the beginning of June. They needed a nonprofit to book the room. So it's like, hey, no problem.
We got it.
We'll step up for you guys and do it. And now they have their room booked and David Walsh can come in and speak. So, you know, Lynette and David are friends of ours, and this is part of that process.
So I'm going to take you through our backstory, and then before I do that, I'm going to take you through what we're going to talk about so you can have an expectation about what's happening here. So the topics we're going to talk about is about parallel economies. Who knows what a parallel economy is? All right, we're going to be talking about that, alternative currencies. Next, we're going to be talking about the culture of death and what's happening out there. And then we're going to be talking about one world religion and one world government. And all through all of that, we're going to be talking about solutions, right? That's the most important thing. So to get started, my husband and I met 11 years ago. We were both doing competitive intelligence. And we decided, hey, you know, we could work really well together, and we built a platform called Parable, which allows us to do market research. So our core business is market research. Well, as we're doing our market research, we started to see things that we were like, oh my gosh, we really need to be telling our brothers and sisters what we're seeing. So we started the first publication called Ripped from the Headlines. We wanted to talk about what other news outlets were talking about, how they were full of baloney or where it was true and what it really meant for you. Right? Because we always wanted to see what the propaganda was. And then Father said, you need to do a little bit more. So we started the second publication called We Are the Watchmen Weekly, where we talk about things that are really heavy, like transhumanism, one world religion. You know, we've been writing about these things for over 2 years now and warning our brothers and sisters about what's coming down. And we actually started touring with Liberty pastors. We started seeing that they were going out there and they were talking to the pastors, and we were like, okay, this is great, but then the pastors leave, and then what happens, right? Do they have something that they can follow? Do they have a workbook? Like, how do they get their, you know, their congregation engaged in what's happening? Well, my degree is in forensic psychology, and I looked at him, and I'm like, you know what? We need to build a workbook. So my husband and I actually built a workbook. The workbook comprises of 3 components. The first one is, what's your story, and what do you need to advocate for? The second component is, how do you build the strategy so that you can advocate for the thing that you want to advocate for? And third component is, how do you make sure that everyone is working in unison with each other? Salt and light is one of the things that we actually use as far as one of the tools that are important for us to be able to say, you know what, church, this is one of the tools that you're going to want to implement in your church, because we firmly believe that when, you know, Jesus was walking the planet, the government wasn't taking care of the people were taking care of the people. So we built the workbook so that we can start taking care of each other. Yeah, and then here we are sitting and deciding who are we talking to as far as, you know, how do we get the church moving and doing the things that we need to do? So we're going to start talking about, you know, the things that are important. These are the reasons why we were like, church, you know, when you start understanding what they're trying to do to us, you know, we need to push back. Rick was talking about, you know, the pulpit. We abandoned what we were supposed to be doing at the pulpit. And now we, the people, have to push back. And I keep telling everybody, because you were right about everybody becoming very lackadaisical now that Trump is in. Well, I keep telling everybody, you know, Trump stands between we the people and they the globalist. Who's got the money and who's got his ear, right? We're not speaking loud enough. If we were speaking loud enough, we wouldn't have children being chemically castrated right down the road from us, right? We've lost grounds that we're supposed to be taking. Father told us to take territory. So RC and I, everything that we're doing is about taking territory and how do we get the church organized to be able to get that done. So, good.
So, Juliana, can we do a couple of rapid fire things? Because there were some things that
Go
came
for it.
up earlier.
Go
Rick,
for
so
it.
I want to talk about real quick the weather modification bill that got through. Dr. Jane Ruby is actually, we do a monthly roundtable on Telegram called the Watchmen Roundtable. Dr. Jane Ruby is going to be our guest on June 3rd. And if you guys want details on that, we'd love to have you join us on Telegram. She was one of the first to point out that that bill has a loophole where the feds can continue to spray.
Yep.
So I know it's like the oh no,
Yeah.
but this is an important lesson in you have to be paying attention to what's going on. Same thing with the legal tender bill. Now, Juliana and I lobbied for sound money, basically gold and silver to be legal tender. This is year 2 for us. So we got it through, but not without hurdles. So that bill is good, but Senate staff put a bunch of stuff in to try to decide which gold and silver is going to be declared legal tender. The good news is DeSantis will sign it into law and we'll have months to refine it, and then it'll be re-ratified by the next legislative session, and then July 1st of next year it will go into effect. These are good things, right? But you see what they try to do when you're not looking. One other thing, I'd like to address the 501c3 thing because this is important. So churches, by default, they don't have to register. They're automatically a nonprofit. They automatically get all the benefit. Now, Watchmen Action is a 501c3, and I'll explain why many do it. So it's fine. You can donate to a church. They don't need to be a 501c3. You can get the tax deduction and everything like that. When you are raising money as a nonprofit, when you get to a certain level, donors will not engage with you unless you are registered, because at that size of donation, I'm talking into the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, they simply can't. They've got to have the clarity that it is a tax deductible donation, because there are 10,000 things, if any of you donate regularly, that happen with that. You may use a donor advised fund or something like that. There are a number of steps that have to take place. And some of the DAFs that we deal with would not deal with us if we weren't registered. So it's important to understand that churches are under no obligation to do so, but the size of the dollar will determine a lot of that.
Awesome. 2 points I want to point out is, one, we decipher what's the propaganda, and we're telling you what's the propaganda versus what they're doing behind closed doors. So they'll say, oh, we're going to stop spraying, but there's a loophole. The feds can keep doing it. And it's like, you're lying to us repeatedly. The core of our business, our value proposition is this. There are 3 levels of knowing. You know that you know, or at least you hope you know. You know that you don't know, but you know how to figure it out. You can ask somebody, look at Google, right? The third part is the most important part. It's that you don't know that you don't know that you need to know. You know, when you're calculating your decisions, you need to have all those components to be able to come to the right conclusion. Remember math back in high school, right? X squared, Y cubed, all that fun stuff. You need to have all the components correctly. So our job today is to give you some of those, nuggets that you need to have so that you understand really what is going on. So the first thing I want to say is, RC, can you talk about parallel economies? What exactly is that? And let's start talking about the different types of currency.
Sure. So if you guys have heard the term, great. If you have not, we'll do a kind of a schoolhouse rock, if you can appreciate that breakdown. So parallel economies basically run alongside your traditional economy. You use dollars or a credit card or whatever to pay. A parallel economy is a series of alternatives that allow you to work. Those could be trade and barter. Many of you have heard of that, right? You could do trade and barter. You could use gold and silver. If people will accept it, you can take it. And now that's being codified into law. In the state of Florida. There are a number of other ways for you to do that. So one of the things we ran into when we worked to get the Legal Tender Act through the legislature was they said, well, what is this going to do to the economy? And we said, make it better, right? We're not trying to wipe out someone.
We had young guys say to us, do they have to do a study for that? And I'm like, do a study to make sure that we can do a gold-backed currency? We were always on it, but they didn't know. Sorry.
Jimmy Petronis, who is the former CFO, is now in Congress. We met with his staff. This is what Juliana's talking about, and they're all in their mid-30s. And they said, well, has there been any study on gold-backed currency? And we're like, prior to 1971, the United States was on a gold. Okay. It's one of the kind of like, oh boy, we need a little time together. So there's that. There is also what you would consider cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. And I mentioned them separately because they're separate things. We'll get to that in a second. But there are alternatives. And we said, look, parallel economies don't necessarily have a negative impact on the regular economy. It gives people options. And in a time
Yep.
of economic instability, you want options.
Right.
As we tell many people when we speak and teach, when something goes sideways, all economies instantly become local. Right? Doesn't matter how far spread you are. When something goes down and things get shut off, all economies are instantly in your neighborhood,
Yep.
your home, your community, whatever the case may be. And you need to have alternatives. That is a good habit to have. Anybody in here a homesteader or prepper? Can anybody appreciate that? Right? Okay, raise your hand because we are too. You want to be prepared. We live in a place where you need to be prepared. We live in hurricanes, right? You should be prepared to go for a week or two without power or supply or anything like that. That's a good habit to be in. Our ancestors, I trace my family back to the 9th century, and our ancestors prepared. They didn't have all the modern conveniences as far as we know. And so they prepared. That is a good habit to be in. A parallel economy is another way to do that.
So I don't think this is on. Oh, it is. Okay, good. One of the things that I wanted to say was Trump said that he's not going to do the CBDC, the central banking digital currency. Who knows about the CBDC? Okay, if they do the CBDC, right, you'll buy where you can buy within your 15-minute city, who you can buy it from, right? They will totally regulate your currency. Trump came out and said, oh, we're not going to do the CBDC, but meanwhile, PS, he's talking about XRP. What's the difference? Not much, right? You're talking about a currency that's centrally controlled. If it's controlled by a central person, they can shut it off. Remember when they took the currency, they shut off Russia and they took away their currency? Well, if they can do that for a country, they can do that for us.
Yeah, so I'll get to the distinctions in a minute because you hear cryptocurrency and you just kind of bundle everything, and there's actually a difference, and I promise it will not make your eyes glaze over. It's actually way easier than people make it out to be, which is part of the reason we're in business. When people want to understand something in a pretty simple way, we try to explain it to them because that's fair. What Juliana mentioned about Russia is interesting because this leads to the trend of what we consider decentralized currency or decentralized economies. To put pressure on Russia, the United States and others said, let's cut them off from the banking system. If you guys are familiar with the SWIFT system, that's how money moves electronically across the world. Right now, the US and other related powers control the banking system in that way.
Right.
So they said, we cut Russia off, we're good. Well, Vladimir Putin had prepared for this. And when that happened, they actually worked in Bitcoin for transactions.
Gold-backed.
Go back. And they thumbed their nose at the world and said, look, we don't really need you. We just proved it. This leads to BRICS. Has everyone heard about BRICS? Okay, so the BRICS nations have also prepared for this because they're getting shut out. And when they do something that I guess you would consider allied powers don't like, then the first thing they do is they try to shut them off economically. If you're China or India or Russia or Brazil, like you don't want that. And so these other nations got together and said, look, we represent 70% of the global population. Why don't we build our own system just in case things go sideways? And then what happened, a bunch of countries started to apply.
Mm-hmm.
And what they declared last year, they said, look, we're going to do our own currency, our own digital currency, pegged 40 to 60% to gold. Well, that sends shock through the US economic system because the fiat dollar is largely powered by oil, thus the relationship with the Saudis. If you guys want to hear that story later, I'm happy to tell it. But they said, okay, we have a reliable, formidable system outside of SWIFT. So I'll go back a moment to Vladimir Putin thumbing his nose. Well, he just did it again. He said, well, you guys thought we weren't going to do anything. And now there's the reality that BRICS has a viable system. So that leads into what you would consider digital commerce, or as you know it, cryptocurrency. So let's do the first thing first. Bitcoin is not cryptocurrency. I know it sounds like it is, but it's actually separate. And it goes back to what Juliana mentioned a minute ago. Centralized means that there is one force that controls it. Everybody follow?
Mm-hmm.
Decentralized means there isn't one centralized force that controls it. Everybody with me?
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin is decentralized. XRP, the other cryptocurrencies are centralized. Why is this good and bad for you guys? With Bitcoin, you know that there isn't one person that can shut you down. Okay? And it's funny because it doesn't mean that it can't be tracked. It is private, but it is not impossible. And that's a good and bad thing, right? With a centralized cryptocurrency, one person's got you. So going back to Juliana's point about the CBDC, Trump has talked about the fact that he's not going to do it. But at the same time, he's talking about XRP and these others, and XRP is owned by a company called Ripple. Ripple has been in a fight with the US government for years, which 2 years before it happened, we knew they were going to win, because the government has been picking winners and losers in cryptocurrency for years, and you didn't know it.
Yep.
RC, why does that matter? Well, if they're going to funnel you into a central bank digital currency box, wouldn't it make sense that the government would have to control the cryptocurrency that's going to do it? And so here you are at XRP. First thing out of President Trump's mouth, preferred crypto, XRP. Why does that matter to you guys? Because most of you in the room are retired. Here's what we've been tracking that you don't hear in the news. Well, you guys may have heard this part. You know how Trump's been saying the gold's coming back? Is there gold in Fort Knox? You guys know there isn't a bunch of gold in Fort Knox. Does everybody know that? Okay. There is not. So it's interesting. Every time they've audited it, there's less gold in there than there was before. Because, as we learned in the movie Die Hard with a Vengeance with Bruce Willis, all the gold's under the New York Fed. That's why the terrorists blew it up in the movie, right? Because they wanted to get to the gold. The guy said Fort Knox, and he said, no, there's 10 times more, right, than your silly Fort Knox. So he said, hey, we're going to bring this back. We're going to audit it. What we've been monitoring is whether or not he is going to attempt to reprice gold and peg the dollar to it in some way. Here's what happens. If that happens and you're not in gold, guess who gets wiped out?
Who?
You. Now, that could happen, and then we'd have anarchy. And you'd all be looking at us, RC, why didn't you guys come 2 years ago and tell us this was going to happen? We don't want that to happen. And that can't happen because that's anarchy. That's basically the end of the world. The only way to catch that is to say, okay, guys, look, you got wiped out, but here's the good news. We are going to make you whole 1 for 1 in our new digital currency. We told you it was going to kind of get heavy in here, right? I feel all the air just gets sucked out of the room. But this is what we do, right? We call balls and strikes. And so those are the differences. One of the reasons that Bitcoin has worked, and you've seen the price stabilize somewhat, it'll continue to grow, is that it's more of a true store of value. Many people refer to it as a digital gold. And we're not hawking Bitcoin in any way, right? What we're saying is understand what you're dealing with so you can make the best decision for you. That's why it's not financial advice. Bitcoin, historically decentralized, has been a better store of value than any of these cryptocurrencies. And we can continue after this. I think it's important to point out that when President Trump goes on and talks about these things, or he launches his own meme coin, you guys remember right before the inauguration, he did Trump coin and then Melania coin. That is a really bad look for us as a nation and him as a president, because what happens is that he's kind of in a limited hangout. I'll get to that later. But the information he's getting isn't clear enough. And so what happens is they say, hey, we're going to run this thing. There are people basically running pump and dump schemes on cryptocurrency, and good folks like yourself and like us are buying into that. And we're getting our knees cut at the top and we're losing money. Guess who's making it? This is why the original intention of government is that when you go into that role, you divest yourself and you put it into a blind trust, because this is the exact thing you don't want to happen. The president should not control the movement of markets in that way. Right. And look, this isn't a knock against Trump, right? We're conservatives. We co-founded the Orange County chapter of the Florida Republican Assembly. Okay, that tells you how we are and how we feel. But we have to be honest about that, because economically, the place that you sit at today in May of 2025 is the place that we expected you to sit at, that we're documented on with Carl Jackson, who is on the Salem radio network. In October of 2022, we were on with him and we talked about now. And it looks about like we said it would. Okay? So just giving you guys some context on the difference between the two is important.
Awesome. So continue with the parallel economies. We've got fiat currency. We have the gold-backed currency for the state of Florida that's going to be signed into law real soon, right? We've got trade and barter currency that businesses do business together with. And then we also have gold-backed is another currency, and you're all going to get one of those. Can you please explain what it is and just cap off the importance of having these different types of currencies?
Sure. So I'll start with Goldback and then I'll go back to the Legal Tender Act that passed in Florida. So the Goldback notes, Jeremy Cordone is the founder. He now lives north of Jacksonville, originally from Utah. Great testimony. For him, his goal was to turn gold into money. And so these notes actually have gold in them, and it's a fraction. So like that half Goldback, I think, has 1/2000th of an ounce of gold in it. And if you guys go on YouTube and you look for Goldback meltdown videos, you'll see people actually melt these down and the gold is there, like spot on, right?
Different denominations.
So when we talked to Jeremy, he said, I want to turn gold into money. I believe communities should have a parallel economy or an option to do commerce in a way other than the fiat system. And so he invested time, money, energy. He bought the patent and the technology to actually make these. So anybody who does this or does anything with Valorum has to go through them because he owns it, right? He said, that's my goal. So the Goldbacks, has everybody seen the movie Homestead? Are you guys familiar, from Angel Studios? Okay, if you haven't, you should. It is definitely worth watching because it's about a grid down event. Goldbacks are actually featured in that movie. They reached out to him and said, Jeremy, we want these in the movie because we want to depict what a parallel economy would look like. And so this is an incredible option. Florida just got its state series. I think we're the 7th, and now Oklahoma and Arizona are going to get theirs. So this is an area that's expanding because just like we talked about with the economy, people are saying, you know what, I should probably have a different way to do things just in case. Or I want my community to thrive and I want it to be on sound money principles. How do I do that?
Right.
Well, great news. Goldback is one of the ways. And Kinesis, some of these groups that do digital gold are trying to do something similar, right? Because it's good to have options. And gold and silver are the best stores of value historically. We've got, 5,000 years of data that matches up with this. Okay. Yeah, great case study. Unless you're Jimmy Petronas' staff. And you didn't know that we were on a gold standard before 1971. I know it's funny, right? So let me speak quickly to the Legal Tender Act. So we talked about what's happening in Florida with gold and silver. Kevin Freeman, who is based out of Dallas, Liberty Hawk Ranch, great story, does a show called The Economic War Room. If you guys have not seen it, you most certainly should. He wrote a book called Pirate Money, okay? And what he discovered, and he shares in the book, is that according to the U.S. Constitution, states have the right to mint their own currency as long as it's gold and silver. Whoa, you know what a check that is for the federal government?
Yep.
But that's the way we're designed. Everybody familiar with the 9th and 10th Amendments of the Constitution? States can do whatever they want. And by the way, anything that we don't give the feds to do, we can do that too.
Yep.
Matter of fact, if we don't like what you're doing at the federal level, we can do that too.
As a matter of fact, you can't do anything unless we tell you you can do those things.
And anything we forgot, you can't do that either.
That's right.
Right? If we come up with it 10,000 years later, you still can't do it. We're designed in a very specific way. So there is the Constitution again, working in our favor because the framers understood this. So the states have the right to do this. And what we tried to do last year with the Sound Money Act, we wanted gold and silver to be legal tender. Then we wanted to make it transactional and fractional, so digital, right? And then we wanted the state of Florida to have its own depository for your gold and silver where they would act as a custodian. So their responsibility was to make sure your gold was there. Right. And then when if we transacted, you and I, that it would move from your account to mine. And then whenever you wanted to go get your gold or silver back, you present your debit card, they give you your gold and silver back. That was the logic. As you guys can imagine, every big bank lobbyist got on board and said, that's not going to happen. Okay. So he said, all right, we got to go a different way. So we got phase 1 through this year. Next year is to make it fractional and transactional. And then the next step is to get the depository done. So we can still get it done, but it's going to take a little bit longer. You would theoretically then, in the state of Florida, have a parallel economy where you could use gold and silver to pay someone with a debit card, just like you normally would. Transaction happens on the back end. So you could go anywhere, buy anything with that card, right? And the state depository would manage it. They can't take your gold, they can't invest your gold, they can't do anything with that. Their job is to hold on to it and make sure that everybody's a good actor.
Thanks for watching our video. Sherloc specializes in research and behavioral marketing. We can help you to see if that opportunity you're looking at is a gold mine or a landmine. Our Parable research platform lets you see who's driving the feelings on any topic, anywhere, at any time, and our Equalizer technology can tell you who is in market to buy any product or service. Learn more about how Sherlock can help you and your business at
Okay,
investinAnswers.com.
so we're going to go on to topic number 2 because it's such a different topic. The culture of death.
Oh my goodness.
We've written about bodyoids and the war on women. I'm going to let you go off on that.
Oh my goodness. So my folks who are well seasoned in the room, that's the term that I use. We are not old. We are well seasoned and experienced, and that's all of you. So congratulations. You know, the war on human beings is real, and we've covered this for a number of years. In case you did not hear Bill Gates years ago, you were all pretty expendable, and actually the faster you get out of here, the better off the rest of us are, apparently. Now, I don't agree, right? My mom's still around. She's in her late 70s. I'm glad she's here. I don't see her as expendable. I love her, right? You know, it's like, you know, your dad's in his 80s. We love him. It's like, but according to Bill Gates and others, you are a drain or a pull on the system, and to get rid of you would be a great job, right? That's the thing. That is the case for depopulation or the case for killing grandma, as he mentioned. What you may not realize is how intricate and timed this plan is. Anybody lose friends during Fluvid, the pandemic crisis thingy?
COVID.
Yeah, I call it Fluvid. Yes. So, you know, that was one of the big pushes. The hope was that they'd be able to get you there, right? They were trying to knock you out there and then keep us locked down to the point where they could implement the plans for Agenda 2030 and things like that for this kind of global control, because that's always the plan and it continues to be the plan. They've just lulled you to sleep. Okay, limited hangout again. I'll come back to that later. So in that plan, they said, well, look, we can kill the old people. Pretty easy, right? We can just knock them off here and there. Crisis comes through, whatever. They run out of drugs. They're dead. We can do better. Let's go down the chain to the younger generations and eliminate their ability to reproduce. Thank you very much, right? This is where the whole quote unquote gender ideology thing comes from. Okay, that is by design. So what you're dealing with is for 200 years, we were taught to think. For the last 100 years, we've been taught to test. You guys understand? Okay, they've got us with education. It was a 100-year plan and they got us so good because look at the generations today, right? You guys have grandkids. Is it hard to talk to your grandkids sometimes? Okay, that's by design. If you look at the education system today, which I know people in this room are fighting that battle, and God bless you because we need you. Please don't stop fighting, okay? That is by design. Gender confusion, this sickness, right? First it starts with, well, maybe you're not, and that's okay. We'll affirm that. And we've said this biblically. It's like, wait a minute, God already affirmed you. Why do you need to be reaffirmed by a human being, Joe Biden? Transgender day of visibility. What kind of bupkis is that? They're already affirmed. You're the devil. Okay, I'll move on. But it starts there. If we can confuse the gender, and what happens with these young people is they do that, and then they're now in this endless wheel of medical care. So you know who's getting rich already, right? Big Pharma gets rich because they have a lifetime customer. Because there's counseling, and then there's this, and then there's the biology issue, and then there's all these things, right? And then these young people get so confused they kill themselves. There you go. You start knocking out the population, right? Pretty nasty thing. So what we wrote about for the first time in January of 2023 is in Canada, they have something called MAID. It's assisted suicide, okay? And what they were pushing for, and we have video of this doctor where she's at a home meeting and she's talking about how proud she is of the work that she's done in helping people to kill themselves, okay? I know, right? Sounds weird. That's how the devil works. What they've accelerated now, because now in New York State, this is also legal, they're trying to blur the lines. So assisted suicide has been around for years. You guys have heard about Dr. Kevorkian and this whole thing, right? They're accelerating it now. What they're saying is, especially in Canada, if you are depressed today, 20-something person, it's okay. Maybe you need to die. As a matter of fact, if you'll come by the office, we'll check you in, put you in a death pod, and suck the life out of you. Because you shouldn't live if you're not happy. The state of New York's legislature just passed that bill. The nation of Scotland is getting ready to pass a similar bill. Canada has now been edified to continue this push, and it's starting to leak into the United States beyond New York. Yeah, no, exactly, right? This is what's happening around you. So it starts there. They justify it. People say it's probably easier to die, right? But then it gets worse. Because then, and for those of us who are more seasoned in the room, If something happens to you and you go into the hospital, has everybody heard about brain dead? Have you all heard that term? Okay. Do we know what that actually means? Technically, it means there's no longer brain activity. But do you know what one of the top bumper crop businesses is in the world? Organ harvesting. Do you know? And by the way, if you do not have this in your will or your trust or your family does not know this, do not let them do anything without that consent. Have it locked in and written. If you learn nothing else during COVID, they will kill you as quickly as possible for your organs. And I apologize for being so graphic and depressing, but yeah, this is what you guys signed up for. They're still good. They still work. Hey, we're good, right? That's a bumper crop business. What do you think is going to happen with assisted suicide? They'll make you so depressed and so frustrated and so worn down, they'll try to get you in the hospital so they can deliver the knockout blow. Culture of death.
So if you're on your driver's license, it says, that you're a donor, take it off, right? Because they will, look at your driver's license and, do from there. So on the opposite side of that is how they're able to take a single cell from a person, be able to splice it and do an artificial womb. Can you do that?
Yeah, so, there's a war on women that's happening. First, it was a family, right? They had to get to the men because everybody understands God's order, correct? It's him, then it's the husband, then it's the wife, then it's the children. Well, they removed the father covering. That was LBJ in the Great Society program, right? Majority of black households prior to the Great Society's program, both parents in the home, church going, everything, right? After that happened, all hell breaks loose. And that spread across ethnicity. It doesn't matter. Now it's just a complete mess, right? So there's the war on women because they really want to get to the children, which we were talking about. So what happens then? Well, if you can blur gender and then you can destroy the family unit, who becomes your family? The government or your friends. You guys remember the TV show Friends? Programming. Think about it now for a second, just based on the conversation we've had. It is better to live with your friends because your family doesn't understand or love you. That's what the TV show Friends was about. They call it a television for a reason. They call it programming for a reason. I'll get off my soapbox on that. So the logic now is that if we can blur gender, then men who believe that they are women can have babies. Now you can laugh, go ahead and laugh, because now we're going to get real with you. We did an extensive story on the Wellcome Trust. This is a nonprofit in New England. The Wellcome Trust got millions of dollars from the NIH. That's your tax money, just to let you know, to do a study to take wombs out of female cadavers and put them in men who think they're women with the goal of having a baby.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming today, did you?
No.
Nobody had that on their bingo card. RC and Julianna are going to talk about wombs and men.
Then you talk about bodyoids.
Yeah, I'm going to come to bodyoids because it gets worse. So they did this study, millions of dollars. We actually had to read through this thing. They had diagrams on how it was going to work, and that was the whole origin of the butt birth. Anyway, so that's a thing. Yeah, that's what they called it. So here's what's scary though, guys, just being real, right? What's scary was the conclusion of the Wellcome Trust study. They said that it would be immoral to not offer this to men who think they're women. Can I give you one more before we jump? Do you know which group stepped up and said, we have 2 teams working on this and we'll be ready to do it in 2 years? The Cleveland Clinic.
Really?
I'll give that a minute.
The Cleveland Clinic.
Yep.
This is happening. How many of you knew that was even a thing, right? Nobody, right? Because you have no idea. That's where they want you.
Yep.
When I mentioned limited hangout a minute ago, then I'm going to jump to bodyoids. A limited hangout is a distraction on a topic to get you to be a dog on a bone so you miss the other thing. Joe Biden cancer diagnosis, they knew about it a long time ago. Her tapes leak, everybody doesn't see it. Limited hangout. Everybody's focused on Biden and cancer. Nobody focuses on the actual thing. That is a limited hangout.
Right.
Okay. So they've said, well, we think we're onto something here. Wall Street Journal a couple years ago does an article saying, you don't really need women to have babies because we can take cells from a man, basically grow them, and then have them in a tube or whatever, or like a thing from the Matrix. If you guys have ever seen the Matrix, those pods exist, and we can just do it there. So if you want it to be a man himself, or 2 men, or 3 ladies and 2 men, or 18 people, you can take all of their DNA, pop it in a pot, and spit out a kid. Whoa, didn't see that coming today either, did you? Right? So that's the cell argument. They're basically saying there's really no need for a
Yep.
woman anymore.
Yep.
Anybody can be a mom or dad as long as they want to mix their cells together, or if just one person wants to do it, that's okay too. It's kind of like the logic of chest feeding. Men who think they're women are given hormones to lactate so that they can chest feed their children.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, look, and there's a picture
Okay.
of a man who thinks they're a woman basically chest feeding a child.
Yeah.
Here's what's really bad, because I know that's pretty bad. Here's what's really bad. The fluid that is produced from that is poisonous to the child.
Oh, great.
Culture of death. Okay, let me get to bodyoids real quick. About a month ago, article runs on the idea of bodyoids. So scientists from MIT say, hey, look, testing on animals is inhumane. Not like killing children isn't inhumane, but hey, if I clubbed a baby seal in this room, they'd arrest me. If I wanted to abort a kid, they'd celebrate me. Okay, that's a battle we have to fight, by the way. Amen. So they said, look, this is inhumane. What we can do is grow bodyoids, human bodies that aren't aware, that don't have a brain, where we can harvest parts and organs from them and use those instead.
And
And,
use the meat.
oh, and you can eat the meat. Ooh, y'all, congratulations on your meat. So this idea of bodyoids, they were justified and they got money to fund this study. And what we said is, we're like, well, hang on a second now. Last we remember, there's only one creator that can create life, and he uses us to do that. You can't go off, well, they're not human. What do you mean? You're growing bodyoids. Apparently, these would be humanoids of some kind that you've grown that you say won't have a conscience. But if we've learned anything from our Father, is everything he creates has a conscience of some kind in some way. So you're proposing to grow humans in labs and then harvest parts from them and then give us the scraps as meat that we can eat. Bodyoids. How many of you knew about bodyoids before this conversation? Okay. This is what's going on with the culture of death. They are normalizing it every day. For those of you who still watch television,
Yep.
every commercial break starts with pharmaceutical ad.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
And have you ever watched, we just watch the side effects, right? Because they always try to show you the nice picture while they tell you how many ways you're going to die.
Right?
Yeah.
Will cause mass psychosis and your left eye to fall out on the third day. And yeah, I know.
It does.
And so you have to laugh or you'll cry. But culture of death.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of you getting healthy, it's sick care. Because you are a bumper crop of money, because the government will continue to fund your sickness versus your health. That's the culture of death.
Watchmen Action is a ministry focused on equipping the church to engage the culture and equipping people to deploy advocacy plans around core issues that matter most to them. Our training allows us to deploy quickly, provide resources, and have people trained and in action in 4 hours or less. Ready to get equipped and take action? Learn more, book your training, or book us to speak at your event at watchmenaction.org.
I know, right?
Whoa. Okay. Third topic we want to talk about is one world religion and one world government. I just want to say to all of my Catholics and Jews, Muslims, I love everybody. But having said that, they are definitely using all of us. If you can please talk about the Abrahamic family house, what we've written about the Catholic Church and how they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, so this one's a little bit of a journey. I appreciate if you all stay. I'll try to make it as clean as possible so you guys can stay with me. So the idea of a one world religion is as old as time, right? This goes back to Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. I think everybody knows their Bible history. So if you fast forward, leading into the first Obama administration, what's his name? Saddleback Church.
Warren.
Rick Warren. Okay. So Rick Warren is kind of the lead of this idea of, hey, look, a one world religion. We are all close enough. It'll work. Just come on in. Right? And it's like, no. Okay, that's a hard no one. But he gave the invocation at Obama's inauguration. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
Did you catch that he prayed to Isha?
No.
Which is the Muslim. Okay, you guys missed that, right? Okay. That's important. Most people did. That was the kickoff, and Obama was specifically designed. Each president is designed for a particular function within the structure of a world government. Everybody has a job, okay, right, in that system. Obama's job was to really be the catalyst for the idea that the United States is not a Bible-believing Christian nation. It is part of a larger world, and now Marco Rubio has said it. We don't live in a unipolar world anymore. We're in a multipolar world. It's us, the Russians, and the Chinese. Enjoy that. He said it. Guy you probably voted for in the past just basically said the quiet part out loud. I'll come back to that. So Rick Warren kicks this thing off. Other folks say, this is a great idea. We're more together than we are different, and so it's okay if you kind of do this and you kind of do that, and as long as your path isn't quite through Jesus, but that's okay too. You're still getting in. Everybody's getting in. Everybody gets into heaven. You get to heaven. You get to heaven. Everybody gets to heaven. Like Oprah, right? So you fast forward, around 2017, 2018, the Pope and the top imam in the world get together and say, we need to have an Abrahamic family house, which happens to be in Abu Dhabi, right? It's in Dubai. So what it is there is a Catholic church, there is a mosque, and then there is a Jewish temple, all on the same property. They just happen to be in the shape of a triangle. That shouldn't be lost on you. The logic is that we can come together under this one world religion. They're doing it to you right now, okay? And many of the people who you may or may not know or admire, if you were actually to dig into them, you would see that they are a part of this plan. One world religion is part of the plan. As a matter of fact, it's in the book. People always ask us, how do you predict things in the future? We're like, why are you surprised we can predict the future when it's already been designed?
Yep.
I mean, the Bible is probably the best predictor of any. It tells you everything is going to happen.
That's right.
And then we just go from there and kind of figure out what's going to happen. But the idea of this one world religion, the Abrahamic family house is up and running, and the lines continue to be blurred. There's a new pope. Everybody familiar? Pope Leo the 14th. You should probably look up Pope Leo the 13th to understand why he took that name and what that actually means. It's not good, okay? Right. So this idea of one world religion is going to be pushed on you. And it's going to continue to be pushed as the best thing ever, and we need to break down these barriers, because if we don't, we will never be able to agree and live in harmony and get things done in a global order. You guys follow? The hegemony of the United States is fading. A lot of that is by design. Many of the people who you know, like, and trust are not your friend.
That's right.
We're not going to call them out one by one right now. That's for another teaching. But you have to understand that. And you have to go in with your eyes wide open. Understand that President Trump is living in a limited hangout.
Yep.
Okay? Because we look at it and we call balls and strikes. We're a research business. We're like,
That's
why is he
baloney.
doing that? That's insanity.
That's wrong.
Like, why would you do that?
Yep.
It's because he doesn't know.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot that he
Oh,
doesn't know.
yeah.
They did it to him the first time. It's not as
Or
bad
he's
this time.
complacent.
Or either he is complicit or he's
Or
just
he's
he's ignorant.
Yeah,
There's only two
Yeah.
ways.
That's it.
When he was pushing the COVID vaccine.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
There you go.
so without having the right voices around, and
Yeah.
here's the crazy part. We got a stay of execution with the 2024 election. We didn't get a reprieve. That's a stay of execution. You got like 12 hours. They're like, okay, we're going to decide 12 hours from now if you're actually going to die. That's where you sit today. Here's the crazy part. President Trump has given us the steal sign to go do everything that we need to do. But your window's about that big.
Yep.
And I'll quickly explain why, because this also ties into one world religion and this one world government idea. When we get to the midterms in 2026, the way it stands right now, it's going to be a disaster for us. It is
Yep.
going to be an absolute mess, which means that the
Yep.
remainder of President Trump's presidency is going to be null and void.
Yep.
Prior to Election Day, we said, at best, you have 18 months to get everything you want to get done. And if you don't, it's over. This is it. You're now down to about 9 months, at best, that you can get things done. Okay? We were with Ken Paxton a couple of weeks ago. He's running for Senate in Texas. He's going to primary John Cornyn, which is a great idea. But he talked about it. He's like, our window is super small. And I asked him, I said, what does Senator Paxton do on the first day? He's like, economy stable, nation stable, clearly define our enemies and go after them. That was his thing, right? I'm like, okay, I'm kind of down with that. You survived an impeachment. I get it. You have to understand what we're up against. By him giving us the steal sign, he's looking to us, because remember now the wall's up, he can't see everything. He's looking for us to move.
Yep.
Right? And that kind of ties into solutions. But we wanted you guys to understand the world in which you live and how it stands today. Rick has talked a lot about this. He and I, we've talked a lot about this when we've seen each other. You have work to do.
Yep.
Because you're up against war religion, you're up against the culture of death,
Yep.
you're up against an economy that at best is teetering and is in the process of a controlled demolition because the system is over. Moody's, everybody familiar with Moody's, the rating system? Okay. Moody's basically controls world credit scores for banks and institutions. Did you guys catch this week that they not only downgraded the US, but they downgraded all the major banks?
No.
Yeah, they did. So they downgraded all the major banks. Reason being, the major banks have trillions of dollars of bad debt on their books. And if they actually had to report it legally, the entire banking system would crash overnight. It's over, right? When Silicon Valley Bank crashed, which we forecasted, and we said if they don't get things under control, it crashed on like a Wednesday. It started. Peter Thiel actually started that, by the way. If you guys didn't know that, it was his fault that Silicon Valley Bank went under. He called his rich friends and said they got problems. Get your money out. Everybody starts to pull their money out. There's a run on the banks. So they shut it down. By Friday, it's in federal receivership. They couldn't find anybody to buy the debt. We were about 11 hours away from a full worldwide economic implosion from one bank, okay? It was so bad that at 5 p.m. that Sunday night, the feds made something up. They took the 1934 Gold Act, which allows them to create backstops out of thin air, and they instituted it to stabilize the financial system, okay? Do you know you guys probably don't know when they actually used that act? Okay. They used that act to stabilize third world countries that are about to implode. Oh, hi.
Third world.
Right?
We're
And so, wow, it took, because we're like, what are they going to do? What is this going to look like come Monday? What are people going to do? Because they're going to get wiped out. The government said, well, we'll just make it up. And that's when Janet Yellen said, we're going to cover everybody. We're not going to cover anybody. We're going to cover everybody. You remember her waffling? It's because they were trying to figure out how the backstop was going to work. And they basically said, we'll just backstop any bank. Doesn't matter. You're covered, right? Here's what we learned, and then we'll get to solutions, I promise, because I know this is heavy. You guys all familiar with the FDIC?
Yes.
Federal, okay, you know that's supposed to insure your deposits, right? Okay, so here's what we learned. We knew, but this is what we learned after Silicon Valley Bank. The FDIC at any given time can only cover about 1.5% of all money on deposit.
1.83.
1.83 at the time. It got hit for like $120 billion with the Silicon Valley Bank run. As it stands today, it can cover about 0.65% of all deposits. Guess what happens if there's another bank run? If you ain't getting to the window first, you ain't getting. Okay? So that happened. And the next week we were on media like nonstop. Okay? And what we were saying is that it's like being sick. Like the issue is systemic. This isn't a one-off thing. You will see a major international bank go under for a reason you're not thinking. You guys remember Credit Suisse? You guys heard? Okay. Credit Suisse went under because their insurance company said your credit default swaps are too risky, we'll no longer insure you. You guys remember credit default swaps from 2008? That caused a bit of a crisis for people. A lot of people lost their homes and their livelihood. Credit Suisse, one of the biggest banks in the world, was playing lottery in the crack cocaine casino. And it got so risky that the insurance company said, we can't do that anymore. So the Swiss government had to basically pay UBS to buy them. I'm sharing this with you guys so you have context on how close we came and where we stand today. Those issues still exist, which is why Moody's downgraded all the major banks. You guys need to be conscious of what's happening around you and to prepare. And with that, we can go to solutions.
Well, actually, I just want to add that, RC and I are personally being affected by what's going on. For example, we went to our commissioners, all 7 of them signed off for my area to be considered a 15-minute city. My commissioner literally said, by 2030, there will be no cars. Get used to it. I biked to this location. It only took me 35 minutes. And Seminole County? Yeah. I looked at him and I said, are you kidding me? And I'm like, we didn't I was just so shocked. I'm like, you're bringing in a globalist agenda. Uber was launched in my city in Altamont Springs. Why was Uber launched? Because our city manager is 100% a globalist and says that, DeSantis people work with him whether or not DeSantis understands that they're working for the globalist agenda. Okay, so Seminole County has been 100% captured. Okay, you want to talk about them wanting to bring in a CBDC in a 15-minute city? I'm in it, and they've got all the reasons to do it at this point. And they're using traffic as a reason as to why they're going to redo my area.
Vision Zero.
That's why they're bringing in circle traffic areas, not because I used to do computer programming. To program a self-driving car to know how to stop at a four-way stop is humongous. But to write a program for a car to come in and out of circle, very simple.
So yes, and they launched Uber about 10 years ago. My daughter was one of the first people to use the Uber. I got all excited. This is before I understood what was really happening here, right? So instead of me having to, chauffeur her around, she could just take an Uber. Having said that, RC and I have been watching what's happening here and how they're encroaching on our sovereignty, right? The solution that we found with all the research that we did was the workbook. It's getting out there and saying, okay, enough of the flag wavings, okay? I'm sick of that. I'm not going to another meeting so you give me another rubber chicken, okay? We need to be organized, doing the things that we need to do. What do you want to advocate for? How do you advocate for it? And we're literally yelling at the church going, you're all a watchman. Ezekiel 33:6 says, right? If I tell you that something's going on, you as watchmen are now obligated to go tell your brothers and sisters because you know what's going on. So I am very strong with telling my brothers and sisters, look, I'm not going to survive this alone, right? We're all going to have to get together. So I want everybody to be advocating for things that are important to them. We're even talking to the teenagers. You want to advocate to have a local little community garden? You need to start advocating for what's out there. Our politicians, they are asking us for the solutions. They're like, we don't know what you guys want. You have to come talk to us. Dr. Latipo was like, I was all for the vaccine until my wife came to me and said, no, this vaccine thing is a bad thing. And then all of a sudden he changed his tune. It was because people were talking to him and telling him, this is what we want. The solution is that we need to start talking about what's important to us. We need to start advocating collectively what we want for our communities. And it has to be super hyper local, right? You're taking over your 10-block radius, you're talking to your neighbors and you're telling them, hey, this is what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? And what are we going to do about it? Okay, we need to come together in action. So there you go.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
We have some of our books in the car. You mentioned books earlier, Bill. So we actually wrote a book called Empowered to Act. It is the antithesis to Rules for Radicals. When we would speak, people would ask us what they should do. We said, read Rules for Radicals in the Communist Manifesto. You'll see they're running the same game on you. Exactly 0 people took our advice. So we said, we'll just write a book. Under 50 pages, you can get moving before you're done reading it. It actually worked.
Does it include all the things you guys are talking about?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. So I'm going to ask you guys a practical question. This is like a super mini version of a workshop, but I think it's important. Do we have time, Lynette? I think we have time.
yeah.
We're good.
Yeah.
Okay. I want you guys to think, and if the answer is no, that's fine. What is the one definitive action you will take when you leave this room today? Anybody?
Share what you've said to other people.
Thank
Beautiful.
you so much. That's
We
very
need to encapsulate what you said, some form of book or a video or something, so we can share that with other people.
Very
Awesome.
good. Right. So you guys are in the 0.000000001% of people. And I know it's
Nobody
funny,
understands this stuff.
but
Nobody.
it's
Right.
it's true. But see,
Nobody.
this is equally important. Notice the question that I asked. How many things have you gone to where nobody poses that question? What is the one definitive thing you will do coming out of this meeting? Some of you may have already done it, where you've said, I'm going to send a text to these people. People need to know who these people are. That's good. Or, hey, did you know that there are bodyoids? Did you know they're trying to kill people in death pods? People take action. But see, that's where we miss. Now, people in this room exclude. I think you're all in action or you wouldn't be here. But think about the people you know. Think about a circle of 10. Think about your neighborhood.
They don't want to listen.
They don't want to listen.
They don't
Right?
wanna listen.
So
Yep.
this is one of the things, though, in the training that we do. The first thing that we tackle is how you frame the story, right? Because flag waving, and Juliana, and I would agree with this, fine, but it doesn't really do much in getting people to move. If you are able to fine tune what you want to say and make it easy enough for somebody else to carry, they'll do it. Now, we did this on your behalf because it would be painful for you. We went through the National Democratic Training Center. We went through their training. Oh yeah, right, good researchers. I gotta tell you something. I see why they mopped the floor with us. Their speed to deployment, which is something that we did with our training, it doesn't matter where anyone is. It doesn't matter what age they are, education level, or whatever. They could speak mumbled English. Within an hour, they can be deployed to take an action to move democratic principles forward. That's how good their training is. This is why you're always wondering, how do they get these people convinced to do that? Because they give them all the messaging. They say, listen, if you want someone to take action, voting. We're conservatives. Hey, you voting? Yeah, definitely. Oh, okay, great. Democrat, you voting? Yeah, where's your precinct? You know what time it closes? Hey, can I help you to get there? I'm actually taking 10 people to the precinct this time. Oh, you work late on Tuesday? Well, on Tuesday nights, the early voting's open until 9:30. I can make sure that you get there. Oh, you're disabled? I can take your ballot to the drop box for you.
I can vote for you.
I can vote for you. I was going to get to that too, because that's like the punchline, right? Right? But it's think about what I just described to you. How many times have you seen that? If any of you are like poll workers or poll watchers, you see the difference, right? We're smarter and we're better looking, say that, but they're more determined to win the last mile than we are, and that's what we're working to solve. That's why I posed a question to you guys. You need to think about what the one definitive action will be that you will take coming out of this meeting, and then from there you can build the next definitive action. Because before you know it, like Juliana said, when you're organized like that and people can clearly understand what you want to accomplish, then they'll follow you. And if you get a group of 5 or 10 of them together, you guys are something else. We knew some ladies, they were called the Jew crew. There's like 5 of these ladies and they're, wealthy, but they were like super precision. They would get together for coffee and they'd have like a 3-point plan. And they influenced like hundreds of people and they would execute.
Yep.
I mean, they were, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to knock it out. Yep. And they would not stop. Yep. I'm like, please stop calling me. I love you, but please stop calling me. Like, I mean it. But you understand what I'm saying, right? They were very determined because they said, we have to win the last mile or we lose the entire battle.
Watchmen Action is a ministry focused on equipping the church to engage the culture and equipping people to deploy advocacy plans around core issues that matter most to them. Our training allows us to deploy quickly, provide resources, and have people trained and in action in 4 hours or less. Ready to get equipped and take action? Learn more, book your training, or book us to speak at your event at watchmenaction.org.